Everybody see that at the back? Tumbleweeds. All right, 2 o'clock. G'day, folks. This is Rich Burdass, Friday Days in Christchurch, and I'm joined by Matt Thomas, IT Business Analyst at Sealord. We're going to talk to you today about a Power Platform adoption story involving talent management at Sealord. Now, I'll give us a quick intro of who's who. I'll do an agenda, and then we'll step through it. So this is going to be a bit of show and tell. You're going to see apps and hopefully demos of apps if I don't lose the internet. So be ready. So I'll go me first. So I'm on the right. Everyone's got sharp haircuts here on the call. Good to see everybody. So if you need to watch any of my clips on YouTube, just look at my name. Only one there. Lots of training tutorials in Power Automate and Power Apps. Hopefully helpful. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I've been in the Champions program that Samir talked about since 2018. Got found when I was making an app for a customer. They will find you and they will get in touch with you. And I also help run the Christchurch Power Platform community. Happy to help, happy to share, just ask questions, away we go. And over to Matt.
Thank you. I'm the bald guy on the left. So I've been working within IT for about 25 years, which officially makes me really quite old. Doing a lot of the BA work, and been at Sealord for about 3.5 years, working within their BI analytics area, and also going through and digitizing a lot of their manual processes or paper-based processes into an electronic format. Cool. There's a helicopter view.
Yeah, and so we're going to just quickly cover off who is Sealord. Hopefully we all know, but if we don't, that'll help. And then talk about the IT systems that are in place today, because that helps prepare why this solution was deployed and developed the way it was. Run through what the process was for talent management, why it needed to change, what we did to change it, and then jump into all the exciting demos and walkthroughs of how it all works. Fake names everywhere through that. And then, show how the whole solution goes beyond just being a Power Platform solution, right? It touches into other reporting systems and other tools, much wider than just the process of tracking talent at Sealord. And then we'll go through pros and cons and then lessons learned along the way. If we get time, I'll go into some of the power effects of some of those lessons and how they can be overcome by you if you ever face them. Otherwise, just catch this recording down the track. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to give us a overview of Sealord. No nuts on the premises, just so we know. Found that out, and then also talk about Sealord IT. So just tell me when you want me to flick through each screen.
All right,
Matt.
Thanks, Rich.
Go that first.
Great. So if there's a bit of a background there for Sealord. For those who have been in any supermarket in New Zealand, there's a good chance you would have seen some form of Sealord frozen product in there, generally in cardboard boxes. So those will get produced in the Nelson factory, and we land the most of our vessels in there as well. What Rich was referring to about the nuts was that we operate under very strict food and safety hygiene standards, so things like peanuts and so forth aren't allowed on site at all. So that's what he's referring to there. So very big.
Sorry, Matt. I turned up one time to come and meet Matt Dodd, and I had a muesli bar in my bag.
Yes.
I was pretty much thrown out. I didn't know, but I do now.
Yep. You'll pretty much be quarantined for that. Large company. We're also a very, very large employer of people in Nelson. We will employ a couple of extra 100 people through the Hoki season, which is just finishing up now. So very, very good for the local economy in Nelson. And we've had a new CEO in about the past year and a half come in, and he's very focused on people and using technology and investing in both of those, which is one of the reasons why this came about. Just one thing, I guess, about Sealord that's not mentioned on there is that sustainability is really big on our agenda. We fish for the future, and with sustainability, that's something else which we are very focused on, which I'll mention at the end of this slide, going to the presentation. All right, Rich, we'll go to the next one. So our systems that we have primarily been on-prem. So we have a lot of on-prem systems, particularly with our ERP. And we have got some sort of support focused systems that are software as a service, like recruitment software. So we're moving into that space slowly, but we're also going through a major ERP upgrade. So our current ERP system is quite old, on-prem, and we're wanting to upgrade into the cloud for that. So you've got a lot of systems, a lot of bespoke things that have been developed out of need and necessity without too much in the way of standardization, using various tools that were the, I guess, the flavor of the month at that time. We have a massive SQL Server presence, and we do use Tableau for a lot of our BI and analytics presentation. We chose Tableau back when it was in the top right-hand quarter of the Gartner BI space. So that's changed now with, but Tableau is what we've got, and it's proven to be really, really good for us. And we've just recently had a massive upgrade, moving away from SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint online. And we've had a new intranet as well called Kaharoa, which has proven to be very successful. So that has actually enabled our entire business to connect with each other. Previously, we haven't been able to do that. If you're on a vessel, you'd largely operate independently. Now we're all connected, which is really good. And like many organizations, we've got a lot of paper and Excel-based business applications going on. Cool. Next slide. Talent management. So there it was. So what we used to have before Rich and his team got involved was a process which was heavily dependent on Excel and Outlook with email, and one other thing, which is blood, sweat and tears of the HR team and the managers involved. Really painful. Nothing more to say than that. I mean, we had one master Excel file, which was by HR, and it was one person's responsibility to update that with a surge of activity around the end of the fiscal year, which for us is the end of September. And there'd be emails going back and forth between managers and HR. Have you sent this? Yes, I have. Can't find it. Resend it. Long time to manually update things in Excel spreadsheet. A lot of stress for managers, really painful. And a flow on for that is that managers and the CEO and the set team, the senior exec team, had very little visibility of where everyone was at in the process, who's completed their KPIs versus who hasn't, which areas are completed, which aren't. So really painful, really time consuming, and I would expect quite familiar to a bunch of people. That's what we had in a pretty picture. With lots and lots of loops back from HR to managers and staff.
So how long would it take, Matt, normally to complete that process per year, mate?
So it would take one of our senior execs, who's the GM of HR, and the person responsible for this within HR, would take them approximately maybe 2, possibly 3 weeks every year just to run this process. So really time consuming for them. Right. And that was one of the deliverables that we wanted out of the project. Yeah. No, that's good. Carry on.
Yeah. So why change?
We've just run over.
Or you want to cover this one, mate?
Yeah. Look, our CEO, like I mentioned before, he's big on investing in people and big on investing in technology, and he wanted real-time visibility of where the talent management process was. The talent management involved dealing with people's KPIs, the key performance indicators, their IDPs, their individual development plans, what training do you need to do to further your career or further your skill set to better do your job at Sealord, and also succession planning. So if someone's leaving, who can step into that role? So a lot of this was driven by the CEO. One of the key deliverables from the project was he was to have basically real-time visibility of where talent management was at, who's completed the process and who hasn't. He also set a company KPI, so it had to be done by a specific date. So using the old process, it was never going to happen. HR, they were just swamped this time of the year, which was preventing them from doing other things. Really hard for managers because they would use templates that were out of date, inadvertently use them that were out of date and send them in, and HR's like, no, that's not the right one. You have to send back and redo a new one. And it was really time consuming and very painful for all of them. Also, when managers left and new ones came in, we had no central store for this information. Managers did their own thing in their own locations. All right.
Cool.
We'll go next. Oh, yeah. If there's any questions, chip in. But yeah.
Just chime in with questions, people. Just or post in the chat. I'm presenting, so it's hard to see the chat, but Matt will catch the questions.
I'll keep an eye on that
as they come in. So the main things about what could we change and what should we change, right? So if you're listening to Matt earlier talking about heavy SQL on-premise SQL instance for all of the people data that exists currently, a few curly elements of the people data being that Office 365 or Active Directory or the unique person number, UPN, isn't necessarily that the key identifier per person. There's a person ID number, which is held in the Microsoft Graph out of SQL, but not necessarily easily accepted from Office 365 users as a person lookup. So you got to use the Microsoft Graph. So, and then because the ERP system is sort of underway replacement, so nothing there yet, but there was a need to get a system in place now. We went with SharePoint as our data source. If I skip through there, so we've got HR people data coming in from SQL on-premise via a data gateway, and then querying the Microsoft Graph to be able to match people and users, because the person ID is the unique digits. That's like a 6-digit code. And then we needed to validate that number against the logged in user to be able to see who was actually coming in to check their records or things. So we had to use that connection. And then we're using a mix of Power Automate, Power Apps, and SharePoint as our key data tools. I'll talk through in the next slide actually about how they all fit together. I know this is a bit of a Dynamics and Power Platform session, but Power Platform still includes SharePoint, so we're allowed to talk about it. And if you give Paul O'Flaherty's on the call, it's not a database pool. It's just using it for list items. Okay, so the new system is made up of 3 different elements. So we've got the app that the managers use, which has all of their people listed in the app for them to see. Then there's an HR app, which is actually connected to SQL and to SharePoint, and allows them to look at new people as they come on board, and then off-board people, so that people will hit the SQL instance of the person data before they hit Active Directory. So we use that to compare and look up who's coming and going, and then who's changing roles type stuff. So we'll go through the HR app with you on this call as well. And then the final part's the management and reporting. I've just put Tableau and SharePoint in there as a data source, but there are also some PowerPoint elements which Matt will show you as well, with some integrations like with Tableau to be able to pull the data. Well, actually, it's not Tableau, it's SAP Connector, to bring in the information from SQL directly into PowerPoint, which is really cool to see. So if you haven't ever seen that before, it's quite an interesting one to look at. So to go through the tool itself, so we've got every year there's the new financial year kicks off, and at that point in time, a folder and a list item record. So a folder in SharePoint's created with unique permissions for that user, their manager, and HR. And then a list items created in SharePoint with unique permissions for the manager and HR. So an employee can see the documents that they are allowed to see, so their KPI file and their individual development plan. But they can't see the manager information around tracking that managers said they've done it type stuff. So it's kind of like item level security on the SharePoint list items and on the libraries as well. So that adds a little bit of complexity involved. The HR app, because SQL's on-prem, there was an existing data gateway for Power BI, so we were able to tap into that. We were able to work with the dev SQL instance and then a production SQL instance to move things up and down. One of the main reasons why there's an HR app and a manager app is generally to associate managers with what they need, in terms of they only need to talk to this person data to track items around whether they've actually done the job of completing the individual development plan or tick a box saying the person's interested in something. Whereas HR's got to do a lot more, and they've got to talk to SQL, so they will need premium connectors. So if it was any other ERP system like Dynamics or other tools, they would be using that as well. So they've got the standalone app generally because they need it for the licensing, but Sealord wasn't in a position to be able to license every employee that was going to use the system to go and talk to SQL to. So you've got SharePoint, HR, SharePoint and SQL, and then Tableau and PowerPoint for the.
I'll just jump in there real quickly. One thing that's almost paid for itself is that when HR go through and run this process to create these folders each year, they pick up the approved KPI IDP templates and put them into this folder structure. So there's none of these old versions floating around. Everybody, all the managers and all the employees have the latest and greatest version. And that's what is HR approved. So that in itself has almost paid for the project.
Yeah. Any other questions around the structure and why we've done what we've done? Anything unclear at this time? Both Matt and I speak pretty quickly, so you can tell us to slow down if you want. All right, so let's get into what this thing looks like. Got screens, but we might be able to look at the actual app itself. We'll skip into that. If you've ever seen any of the apps that I make, then they all tend to look like that. Not because I can only do it one way, just because the circles are good and people understand them, right? So easy to push a button to know what's going on. So there's two apps. So this one is my team. Is like I'm the manager, so I've got access to it. I can see my people, and then HR app, and that will actually open up a different app within the same browser tab. And then for reports, I can then, if I'm HR, I can go and see reports, so I can download a CSV of everybody and their current status if I need to, or I could go straight to Tableau for that. And then generally all the apps are built with Sealord. It looks similar with a nice picture, and then full screen layout. And they are all Canvas apps because with the data source we're talking about with SharePoint, I've got no option for model driven, so it's all Canvas. But then I do like Canvas anyway. So if we look at what these things do, my team already said it, I think, filters the view, same gallery, so all the data is in the same space, but with permissions on the SharePoint items, and then we know the logged in user, and so we can then filter the gallery of those users based on who's looking at it. HR app opens up another window, and then over to Tableau for the reporting. And then to give you a demo of how that plays through, this should play. Yep. The names are obviously fictitious. I had some fun making those, Matt. So through here, if I need to establish an emergency placement, I've got screens of this, so you don't need to keep up with it at the moment, but I can basically, I've got the ability to click on something. It will give me a pop-up of it, just the element that I need to deal with, because we can see we're laying the data out here in an editable grid type layout. There is a few smarts in the system around. I need to select a previous date or the current date to say when I set the individual development plan. I can't say I did it next week because I haven't got that far yet, right? So then I can also clear my date fields, jump through from there, and then we've got succession and role information at the end. If based on specific other columns that have got the right components ticked, then the person's eligible for succession planning. I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk about the way succession planning works, but in terms of the form itself, we disable a lot of the field controls until a person's taken action, so we can try and force them to make sure they put the first item in at item number 1 and not down at number 5.
That's right.
And yeah, and then we ascertain who the incumbent person is based on the role that's in that position. And so we see on the screen now, if there's a role with a, say, business analyst where there's 2 people in that job, then we don't auto select the incumbent person for the role. But for the admin and assistant and the auditor, there's only 1 person in those roles currently, so we were able to look up their name and put that in pretty quickly. Just allows, I guess, all of the little tweaks that are in this app are all trying to make the manager's life a little bit easier.
Yeah. So I'd just say with succession planning that there's just 2 viewpoints from that. One is if you are a manager and there's a good chance one of your KPIs is to ensure there is succession planning into your role should you leave. That's where this comes in. So if I was a manager and I could help identify someone to train up into my role, that's part of succession planning. Alternatively, I might be someone who wants to move into a different area of the business, and that can be identified here as well. So I can look at succession planning into a different role. Thanks, Rich.
Same one. That's right. Skipping through. Cool. So a few of this, what we see here on screen is the main grid of my team. and obviously we highlight red for elements, and there is some counting done at the bottom around who's put what in, which can give you the manager reporting, but HR reporting that much more globally. Elements, when we first started with the form, there was only like 6 or so questions, but then more things came along based on when HR were able to see the potential. Often we found when you do move someone up into the Power Platform from paper or Excel, you just don't know what you don't know at the time, right? So sometimes an HR team or any team needs to be able to see something. So if you are on the journey of trying to get buy-in from others higher up or at the same level of what's happening, any kind of concept app that you can show them that gives them more of a feel for how this thing that's now online that was previously paper could work is a really good thing to do. So just a little tip there for any future app makers. So we saw in the clip, if I select the emergency placement, so it's blank to start off with, and I can look up people, but I can also say, the team's going to cover it. So we can see there for Michelle Isaacson, the workload is split across the team, and Matt Lowry's a contractor. Basically, if I click on that, I'm going to get a form which gives me all the positions that exist in the company, and that's detailed down from a linked SharePoint list, which has all of the positions and all the right people. So all the people that are in the app. So the Sealord employs a lot of people, but the people that are actually involved with emergency placements and using the talent management app is a much smaller element of those people. It's about 250 people or so.
240-ish, yeah.
So in terms of making decisions around which data source to use, how to present the information on the screen, then because the numbers and each team is generally like 10 to 15 people max size. There's a couple that are larger, but the layout using a grid rather than having a click on a person and open a form just was putting it into the grid was an easy way to have it's a quicker interface for a manager to click, so they can move through as they need. Just skip through
sorry, I'll just say real quickly, Rich, all the managers will be accessing them via browser as well, so they have a decent sized monitor to look at.
Yeah.
Rather than just a mobile phone.
Another key point when you are moving up to another system and adopting the platform is who are your end users and what tool are they going to use? Because if it's a mix, then you've got to think about how you want to make that best presented. Some of the actions on a phone you might take, you might not take in a grid view. You might lay it out completely differently. So yeah, there are definitely design choices that need to be thought through. So succession role info, like we saw. Again, we just select the role for the person, whether they're ready or not. Do you require that information, and then who is the current incumbent person, and they have to make a selection, and then add notes as needed. Skipping through again. So the files piece, because at the start, I think if you were listening, we've got a workflow that builds out a SharePoint folder system, SharePoint library with folders, with secure folders. And we took a few stabs at that when we first did it. Thinking, why don't we lay it out per manager and then have the manager's team in a folder? But then managers change, right? They come and go, move across teams or leave. And so that would be hard in terms of ensuring our item level security around that. So we went with more of a flat structure. So basically every file folder is based on the person's email and then financial year. So the person's name will always be in the system, and then all the files that are auto-generated. So when the folder's made, then 2 files are dropped in there dynamically right from the start. And it happens every year. So just basically HR have the ability to put in a new financial year, and then that will kick off the process, look up all existing, and then add in a new folder with 2 new files in for that person to complete. And so I don't think Matt will mind us showing his individual development plan for FY 2022. Can't see much of it, but we can see that's his role. We can see his manager, and we can see a one-up manager. So that's what we do use here is the Word online connector to use a Word template and then be able to populate the active controls inside of the Word template with data coming in from the data source. So if you haven't ever used that, it's a premium connection, but it is a really useful tool if you've got continual templates you want to use. And then the feedback was, let's make this job as easy as possible for managers to fill out these documentations and the form. If they keep having to go in and type in their employee's name when they're in that employee's folder, they're going to get narky with us, right? So let's do what we can, populate what we can, where we can, and hopefully make their life a bit easier. Yeah. And then in terms of on the security level, so the permissions, so Anna and Dawn HR, Matt. Everyone's called Matt Sealord, if you male.
Matt or Matthew,
just,
yes.
just so you know. I deal with 4, I think, at the moment. Yeah, and so
there's 4 Matthews you deal with.
Yeah, and so the little trick in here was, which I go through in a bit of a workflow, is so Anna's kind of HR level, Dawn's HR senior exec, and there's a senior exec team, and Anna's not allowed to see senior exec teams individual development plans and KPIs, right, because it's level up above her. And so we had to make sure that we were able to adjust permissions at a certain level, so that if the person we were doing the work for, the folder for, was a member of the SET group, then adjust the permissions slightly differently to how we do it for a regular employee in the system. So we do that with Office 365 groups, and if you're a member of that group, then we can make a change and make a call on it. So I can show that in the workflow in a sec.
Yeah.
Any questions on that app while we go through it? If there are any. Is anybody still on the call apart from just me and Matt?
Oh, someone's awake. That's good.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I was paying attention earlier, but when you were on the screen you were at before, when you had my team and you had the people listed, is the data source for that the SQL Server database?
No, that's SharePoint.
The SharePoint is for the whole thing, not just the files. So one row there is one item in your list. Yep,
that's right, with item level security on it. So I find so for Matt's team that we saw there, there's 200 rows in the SharePoint list. Each one's got unique permissions that's maintained by a Power Automate whenever a change happens. And then so Matt, basically on looking at the gallery, it says who's logged in. Oh, it's matt.thomas@sealord.co.nz, and then we filter the gallery where manager ID equals matt.thomas@sealord.co.nz. And then because if you didn't, you could filter a gallery like that anyway, and everyone could still have permission to the SharePoint list. So they could see it, they could backdoor the way into SharePoint and view it. So that's why we apply the item level security as well, so that should you find your way into SharePoint and go and look in site contents and find this list, you're still only ever going to be able to see just the people that you've got permission to see.
Thanks.
Cool. So we'll go through now the HR side of the app. So this part of the tool does talk to SQL, and then actions taken by HR in this part of the app will push changes down into SharePoint and call different Power Automate workflows. So that HR need to be licensed to be able to make changes, and then some of the item permissions that need to occur require an HTTP request to SharePoint as a Power Automate action, and you need to be a site owner at that point or a site collection owner at that point to be able to make those changes. So different changes that needed to occur for those people. So we have a few different options. We haven't enabled send notifications yet, but all of the other parts. So you've got the ability to add new employees, archive an employee, edit an existing one, so they change their name or they change their email, that sort of stuff. Move an employee to another manager, replace a manager. That does like a group change. So so the manager of the BA team changes, then you can make a mass change rather than having to worry about going into each person and make that change. Create new folders is again obviously each year. That's just only going to be used once. And then we do a check people and data sources to be able to see everyone that's in SQL and everyone that's in app, and then whether there's a difference between the two. So we kind of show the difference. So it's like an exception report to show people that may need to be added by HR and haven't got to it yet, or people that need to be offboarded. And then because HR can also assist managers, they're not supposed to, but they can if they need to. They can jump in and look at an employee's record and make a change should they need to. Say a manager is called away sick but has to complete their work and can't do it, then HR jump in at that point. And they can also go in and view each manager and see where the status of all their work has been. So skipping through, so checking people in the data source. So the HR tool is called Affinity, so that we can see here that there's two people that exist in Affinity, but they haven't been put into the app yet, so they need to be added using the add employee. We could dynamically make that happen, but it's better to have a person look at it first and make sure that everything's correct and then push them in. Was the call there, but it is just a one-click operation to move them in. Moving through, so adding a new employee. So those two people that are listed, right? So I can see them, so I don't need to look up a whole list of people. I only see the people that don't exist in the app. And so we can see up in the upper right, there's a little bit of a count around employees, in Affinity employees in the app. You can see there's a difference of 2, and we can see 2 there, so that helps everyone. The maths are all right. If those numbers are off, then we know something's wrong, so we can go and look at the app, but then they can select the person they want to select, and then add in that person. So on select of the person, so on change, create a variable, grab that person's detail, populate a form with that person's data, grab their manager, and then an Office 365 or a custom connector call is made to get that employee's email address from their Office or Microsoft Graph employee number using a custom connector in Power BI. Oh, sorry, Power Automate. Sorry about that. But then basically submit that. That will kick off a workflow for this new employee, creates a list item for them with the right permissions, and then also a folder in the same data source as well, or a library in the library to capture their data, and adds in the development plan and the KPI form. And replacing a manager, just to show how that works. So for in terms of HR ability, you just make the 2 changes. So who's the manager that needs to be replaced? Who's the new manager? The assumption is that that person has come through and has a flag against their name as they are a manager. I can't just put anybody to be the new manager. And then submit that. That will kick off a workflow, and then run changes through the system. And I've got kind of just a sample of some of the Power Automate workflows that we've built. So this one, just to show you, I'll go into the actual workflow and Power Automate just to do it. But if you are, apart from the spelling mistake I've got in there, point see if you can spot it.
Excluded.
There you go.
Third one down.
Yeah. If you're working in Power Automate, any of your teams should always have every action, every trigger should have a friendly explanation of what the heck that thing does. If it's too hard to explain what it does in an easy name, add a note in there. It's really easy to click the ... add a note, so that everybody knows what's going on. And now basically we split out then down into the basically a parallel branch within Power Automate to be able to create a folder, and then for every person that we found, make a folder for them, and then delay. Probably don't need to put delays in, but I found with SharePoint it's nice to put like a 5-second delay after you've done an HTTP request, just to make sure that everything has wiped its feet properly and it's all ready to go with the next action. You may find that I found that with Microsoft Graph 365 Team API calls. I don't know if it's the same with Common Data Service or Dataverse, to put like when you want to run lots of things around the same record, just to wait. Sometimes makes it easier. That's how when I should put delay. Shouldn't have delay 4, 3, and 2 there, but it's just me cheating. Well, I'll step through that in more detail in a sec. Right, next action. And so for viewing all employees, if I click it, I've got the ability to search by people. I haven't put filtering on here, and HR, they do actually have a few extra fields they can look at. And then they can get a view of what's going on if they need to, or they can just filter and search on the people. So they basically have this very similar interface to what every manager has, but they see all of those records.
And look, I was just going to say, it's great for managers when they come in and look at their view, because they can see the red border and know that's an action they have to take at a glance.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to hand over to Matt, talk about how this data then surfaces up into the other reporting tools that are used.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I did with Sealord was I built a manager dashboard, which allowed them to go through and look at things like unapproved leave applications, leave liability, leave calendars, which are really good for planning people's leave over Christmas. We went through and extended that by taking the data from the SharePoint list, loading into our data warehouse and pushing it through and presenting it in as another tab in the manager dashboard. And this meant that when a manager logged in, the same security is applied, so that they can only see themselves and all the team underneath them. And they can then easily see, has the KPI been set? Is the IDP required? Has it been set? So everybody has to have a KPI being set. Not everybody has to have an IDP. So that's why we've got it. If it's required, then it needs to be set. If it's not required, then it doesn't get set. So green means it's done, red means it hasn't been actioned, and grey means you don't need it. So no further action required on that. And what I've done is I've blanked out everybody there except myself, and I've just passed my mouse over the that third green dot down, which is my KPIs being set. It just pops up and tells the manager who the person is and when the date it was that the KPI was set. So that's as much as the managers need to know as well. This does reflect what is in the manager dashboard, but when you start rolling up to more senior managers, they want to see everybody under their organisation and everybody in their team much easier, and our CEO could then see the whole organisation at a glance, which is what he needed, which is one of his key deliverables from this project. And you could have it real time if you wanted it. So that's the next slide. Yes, that's serviced up with Tableau. Now, we also turn around and present to the set and our board succession planning. And the idea here is to say, look, here's a role, who's the incumbent, who might be ready now, ready in 1 to 2 years, ready in 3 to 5 years, or there might be an interest in the role, but we haven't put a time frame around it, and who the emergency placement is. So again, I've blanked out all the names except myself. And you can see I'm the incumbent for the ITBA role, and if I was to get hit by a bus, the company would get a contractor in to cover my role. So at a glance, when we present this to the set members or the board, this is just in a PowerPoint slide. I'm using an add-in from the SAP BI toolset called Live Office, which allows me to bring a report into PowerPoint, embed it in there like you see on that slide, and there's a refresh button added in PowerPoint, which you hit refresh and it just hits the data source, refreshes, and everything updates automatically. So what that means from an end-to-end data lineage is that if a manager updates something in the talent management app, we can pick it up and push it through the data warehouse and then refresh this, and then within 5 minutes they can have the changes available to continue any presentation. So we can actually make changes live during set and board presentations.
Thanks, Matt.
That's all right.
So I got my neighbour's doing some sanding, so that's the joy of a Saturday conference from home. So hopefully you're not hearing that in the background. The noise cancellation teams is working as expected. It's good. Okay. Any questions on the reporting piece or any of the HR functions? Cool. We'll crack on. So we're going to go cover off just pros and cons using the tool, and then some of the lessons learned through it, and I'll try and jump into the app for each of the different lessons learned. We've got a few minutes to go, which is good. So kicking off, in terms of the pros, the good things about the app, we were able to bring it up really quickly. It was a few weeks to build it, get it set up and running. Took immediate pressure off the HR, single point of failure of one person or a bottleneck of all the tasks being put on one or two people. So push back to the managers. That comes with different elements, right? So the managers now have to do a bit more work, and so they need some help to make sure they've got it right. But with training, it does make sure they get there. It is also now able to get, basically going to get very good reporting in real time if you want it, of all of the talent and KPI tracking from the app up into any of the reporting tools that exist. So Matt's connection in the Power BI stuff and the Tableau reporting is real time, right? It goes and queries that data. So Tableau can talk to SharePoint just like Power BI can and get that. And the refresh rate can be controlled as needed. So really, really good for that part. All of the PowerPoint presentations too. So, Sealord, still paper, still heavy paper, still heavy Excel, still heavy PowerPoint, right, and Word. So putting this information into a PowerPoint that can be dynamically updated and shown to other managers from an HR like exec level person talking back over to the rest of the senior team via PowerPoint is a perfect way to present the information, because the screens look exactly like they looked last year, but they've just got live data coming into them, and so that everybody knows exactly what's going on and who's replacing who if that ever needs to happen. So in terms of having a flexible platform to be able to integrate with tools that people are already using, it's been a good fit for that.
I'll just
managers don't need to go.
Sorry, Rich, I was just going to say really quickly there, that activity of presenting everything in PowerPoint presentations saved our GM of HR about at least a week, maybe 2 weeks a year to do that. So having that data available and also having historical notes available, being boarded automatically, that's just saved so much time. one version of the truth back in the talent management app rather than emails and spreadsheets. Sorry, mate, carry on.
That's right. Cool.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make managers think, right? Apologies to all the managers on the call. But
Someone's
generally,
going to thumbs up. There's more.
Making it as easy as possible for anyone to use the tool, right, is where you want to be. They just need to be able to see their team, have that team get updated based on changes that they know have come in, remove people when person's left, with like archive them out, and then just basically tick a box, put a date in, click a button to open their Word document, job done, right, easy peasy. So that's been a good win for the managers, and then with minimal training, they're able to pick it up. The key things are around there can be a lag between onboarding an employee and that manager seeing that person in their list of people, but that is controlled by HR. So that's still a single point, but it generally the kind of the attrition and additions of people isn't massive. Like you get 1 or 2 a week with the bigger company, so it's not huge in terms of the overload on HR to be able to validate and put that person in. Being able to put all of the documents for individual development plans and KPIs into the same library with folders with permissions on has saved. It basically brought consistency from the Wild West of wherever managers were putting it before, beyond people's computers, in OneDrives, on Granny's machine down the back somewhere. People's data could be everywhere. So it's now centrally stored in a secure location in SharePoint, and then obviously all the version history of all the list items and the document records is in place to ensure that everything, should there ever be a mistake, that data can be re-seen and re-added back to the list items if needed.
So Rich, just one other thing real quickly, that whole SharePoint online folder structure is going to prove to be even more valuable and more useful for us in the future, because one of the things that we do have is monthly one-on-ones between managers and direct reports. Now managers can start storing all of those one-on-ones based on a common HR template in that same location. So rather than having those one-on-one recordings all over the place, they can just put it in the same employee folder. So it's just going to get more and more useful for us. Thanks.
All right. So just some of the things that are just issues that need to be overcome. Not necessarily bad about the app, but just basically when you're, every company's different. Your UPN, your email address isn't always the same. Like it's not always the primary identifier for people. So that's just one of the things we had to overcome for this issue. Resetting the expectations of managers that they need to do more. Couldn't just email and hope that HR could read their minds was a biggie. So that's worked out well. And then once managers see the benefits of it and know there's more things coming, that does help. Moving from paper to online always comes with multiple changes. So if you're ever doing that in your organization or helping an organization do that, then always allow more time for kind of the ideas to be changed and adjustments to occur, because you can see on a Word doc, you can get the fields, but then online there's different expectations sometimes in that process. There's a lot of sometimes hidden processes that happen with Word that you don't necessarily have visibility of, and sometimes the people involved with it may not in their bubble, but someone downstream might be touching that Word document, doing something with it. So ensure there's strong business analysis of what the process flow of all the different eventualities of documents are, so that you can map it into a Power Automate kind of tool. One of the things we found within the tool is we're doing a daily check of all the roles that exist in the organization, and they populate in the list of kind of roles that people can select, and then mapped against that user. But if a new role happens, I think the daily import happens around 6 a.m. But if someone joins and creates a role later in that day, sometimes that role is brand new and it doesn't exist in the database yet. So there's been a bit of teething issues around trying to make sure that we map up and make sure we can get like an instant or an update quickly done if a new role has come along. So it can be rapid fire recruiting people sometimes. So, and the roles aren't always set in stone. So being more flexible, that would be something that we will bring in. And then the Canvas app layout works right. When we first started, there was a lot less fields, and we stuck with gallery versus form. And so there's now on the HR form, it is a little busy. Still okay, but that's why we've got the pop out. My mate Paul hates pop-ups, but I think they're okay. As long as you document and you provide recordings and everyone knows that they exist. If you ever have to edit stuff. Yeah, if you were to do it differently, you could have just a list of names and then pop up a form rather than per person, rather than showing in a grid. But again, it's another way to do it. Could work if you've got lots of data. Less data, grid view is nice, but there are if we have to end up adding lots and lots more functionality into the app, then we'd pivot into a form.
Yeah.
With the licensing piece, need a data gateway, need on-prem server, and so you've got to account for licensing. Even with Microsoft's changed the licensing for the next year or so with the slightly cheaper per app or license, it's something the business does need to be aware of. And so as a like internal IT, getting used to using the Power Platform, being able to use, I don't know if anyone knows about it, I hope you do, the ability to do your licensing via Active Directory groups for Power Platform is really useful. And then with the ability now of using a per app, per pay-as-you-use type model, when that comes in, that could also help Sealord quite a lot. They're not big Dynamics customers yet in terms of the, I don't know which ERP is going to come along, but if you're only going to talk to SQL every now and then you could use the per app model and pay-as-you-go. Across a much wider range of people. At the moment, we've restricted the access to the premium connections to certain groups within the business, but it does make it more options are more available, I guess, in the future. But yeah, as a licensing, it'd be great to have everybody can use the same tool. We don't have to think about licensing; we can just go for it. But when data's coming from different places, that is a thing you need to think about. Last slide for me. So again, main lessons, things we picked up on and learned through this. Iterative approach is needed, moving from paper up, and for any tool that is hitting an online system for the first time, definitely start with your initial requirements, get them in place, and then build so that you can extend. Don't have everything locked into a specific way of doing it, because then when change does come along, it gets real hard. From my side, in terms of Power FX, so if you're going to use combo boxes in galleries and you want to put an on-change action on those galleries, you've got to be real careful because a combo box will trigger an on-change action as soon as it loads. So you need to ensure that you aren't triggering the on-change action. So on-change in the gallery, so if I was to show that in a sec, we've got like a hidden button, an action that happens and updates all the items in the row whenever a change occurs. And so if you're not careful, you can hit a situation where you load a screen of 10 people and they've got 10 on-change actions and they all suddenly start firing. And you'll notice that in testing if you use the monitor tool. So you just, in terms of how to avoid that, every combo box also has an on-select action. So set a context variable in the on-select that when that's set will allow the on-change to run. But when the screen first loads, that doesn't set. So then it avoids all drama there. Clearing the date fields. It's not easy in the UI just to be able to clear a date field. If you've ever used the date picker in Power Apps, a Canvas app, you can't just delete it once you've selected it, which can be really annoying. So but we basically got a little X next to it, and that just sets the field back, reset field. It's just not. It'd be a great addition for Microsoft if you could just reset your date field from your date picker. But yeah, we had to put something in there to make that happen. Yeah. Other lessons, so it's basically being able to disable controls until people are ready to use them, or until they're ready. Just needs a little bit more thinking about how to make sure that you're daisy chaining things up in a good way, because there are multiple conditions that can kind of enliven up a field. So just it takes a bit of thought process and good naming of all of your controls so you know which ones are changing what. Opening an app in another app. So if you've never done that before, let me get out of that, bring up Sealord. So if I want to go to HR, not that one. Where am I? In the right app? Yep. There we go. I hope you can see that. But basically, so the HR app is a separate standalone app, and that will open up a new app by itself in the same window that I'm already in. So that's the URL of the app, and there's a little bit of deep linking that goes on here as well. But then this piece here is what you want to have in place for opening your app in a new window, or opening another app from your same app. So just anyone's got any questions of that, can help cover off that in more detail. But just it takes a little bit of thinking to get that right. Again, for us, lessons wise, we did a few layouts of folders, how to make things work, and then being able to use a custom connector to be able to extract the employee's email based on their employee ID was a really really good way to make it work, but obviously at a premium with the licensing, so we had to be smart on when we use that. So we didn't license everybody to be able to use the custom connector. It's only HR and the service account that does a one-off job to update things whenever they're needed. So I can show you, if anyone wants to talk about custom connectors, I can as well. So Matt, have you got anything you want to summarize on in terms of lessons learned or good things, bad things before we hand over to questions?
I mean, for me, the whole project was a good learning experience because it's the first time I'd ever done anything in the Power Platform arena. So I really, like for us, it was just finding out as we went along, okay, is it going to work this way or is it not? One of the big things was that using one app to open another app to keep our licensing costs down. That was one of the big learnings for us, because we only had 2 or 3 people in HR using the HR admin area, so there's no point in paying licensing for everybody to have access to it if they aren't going to use it. Yeah.
All right. So that's our little show and tell of how Sealord have adopted the platform for talent management. They have got a series of other applications in a pipeline to be building on top of this kind of thing, but it's kind of one of those apps that got some good runs on the board, to use a cliche for the cricket that's going to come up, go New Zealand, in terms of when that's going to happen. But the starting, if you're going to introduce the Power Platform into your business and you haven't got Dynamics as the big sell of like that we're going to change the way the world works for everybody, coming in with a tool that's really important and requires strong visibility from a senior leadership team, getting a good app in place that meets their demands does open the door to be able to allow them to say, yep, we like that platform, we've got other possibilities for it, let's go with it. Like this wasn't a heavy, massive, expensive and long process project app to put in place. So it's good. Yeah, so if you were going to come in and say, oh, I want to use the Power Platform and it's a $100,000 project today, let's test this thing out. No one's ever used it in this business, but let's just go for 100 on it. There's a big risk in terms of failure on that one. So starting small and growing from it is definitely the way to go for folks that are wanting to try and follow this kind of model. Does help. And you get people used to it, and you understand more about how they actually operate and how they work with systems.
Well, I think from an end user point of view, they don't need to, or don't really, no offense, Rich, care that it is a Power Platform. It's just, hey, here's a portal where I can go and do my talent management, KPIs, IDP, succession planning. And I've sat down with a manager, they'd never seen it before. I said, right, I'll sit with you and watch. And they did their entire team in less than 5 minutes. Previously, that would have taken them a couple of hours every year. So it's paid for itself, multiple times over already with the time savings across the organisation. Yeah, and Rich mentioned before about other areas. So look, we're doing something in sustainability using the Power Platform environment as well. So it's proven we can develop and deploy small apps using this platform to meet very specific business needs, and that's exactly what we've needed.
I'll stop sharing. Anybody got any questions for us?
Oh, there have been a bunch of questions in the meeting chat, which I've been answering as we've gone through.
One quick question. You might have mentioned this, Rich. From the start to the end, what did the entire process take?
Length of time?
Yeah.
So less than a month, Matt?
Yeah. Look, we had something up and running in front of the business in less than a month, and we made some refinements on that because we did have some very tight time frames to have this delivered. So, like, we didn't try and gold plate it and make it more than what it actually is. It's talent management. There's just a lot more we could have done, but we kept to scope, and within a month we had managers using it.
That's an awesome story.
It's
well done,
really
guys.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Just for me and for Matt, just look us up on LinkedIn or in the list of the speakers in your app. Just connect up, ask your questions. I'm always happy to help answer how we did it, what we learned. I hope that was really useful in terms of like seeing an app, seeing what someone's done. Think about how you could do something like that in your organization possibly, or if you're a consultant, how you could do something similar as well. It'd be cool. But yeah, definitely happy to share more as needed. We've got 5 minutes before Eliza's going to talk, so if everyone will take a break and then be back on deck in 5. Thanks, Matt. Thanks very much for presenting. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. No, pleasure. Thank you, and thanks everyone for listening. Hope you got something out of it.
Thanks, folks.
Cool.